Hey everyone, this is probably someone that's well known to most, if not all of you, is a good friend of mine, Dr. Jim Dahle. He is the founder of this amazing brand called the White Coat Investor. I'm going to let him talk all about, what that's all about, his mission behind it. But it's a place where so many of us have learned about finances and figuring out how to be better with our money. It's an amazing business. It's impacted so many physicians out there in our community. And I'm just excited to talk to him today. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back at Leverage and Growth, Peter.
Yeah, we love having you here because a lot of what's happened here is a result of a lot of the work and the time and all the stuff that you've built, leading up to this. Jim, for people who don't know, tell people exactly what is the White Coat Investor?
Well, the one-liner is that we help docs stop doing dumb stuff with their money, and that's basically the point of the White Coat Investor. It started out as a blog in 2011. And has grown into obviously a lot of different mediums since then, podcasts and email newsletters and books and courses and, a live conference for those who've been to that, as well as social media and communities and YouTube channels and all those kinds of things. But originally it was a blog. And I was just basically trying to help doctors stop doing the dumb things that I did with my money when I came out of residency and help them so they could practice on their terms, so that they could focus more on their family, on their own wellness, on their patients, instead of worrying about business and finances and investing and those sorts of things. It turns out it's not that hard to get your financial ducks in a row, but nobody teaches you this stuff in undergraduate or medical school or, even residency. And nobody's really lined up to just teach you this stuff. And so we stepped into that niche and that's what we've been doing ever since. It's just about 12 years now we've been doing it, and it's been remarkably successful initially just in getting that message out, eventually as a business. That part of it took a little longer to figure out.
Why even put it out there for people? You said you were figuring it out on your own, but I'm always curious why people actually make that leap where it's, you're taking care of yourself, and now you're trying to figure out how you can help other people. Why'd you do that?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's that same passion that drove me into medicine. If you look at just about all of our personal statements when we applied to medical school, they all said something to the effect of, I love science and I love helping people. Well, I do love science and I really do love helping people. And so it's more of a desire to just help other people. It's a bit of a missionary zeal. I've learned something cool and I'm like, this could really help a lot of people. So I share it with others.
And why did you start with a blog of all the different platforms maybe you could have done?
This was 2011, right? Podcasting wasn't that big yet. Very few people were doing much on YouTube. Nobody had a Facebook group. Blogging was where it was at. So it was a pretty easy decision there, number one. Number two, I'm naturally a writer. I'm not a performer. I apologize to anybody who has to listen to my podcast or watch my YouTube channels because that's how they prefer to learn. Because I am not a performer. I'm not, I may be a little bit boring, but I feel like of all those skills, the one I'm best at is writing. And that's the one I enjoy the most. So that's why it was a blog, and it still is a blog.
And was there ever any doubt for you about the stuff you're putting out? Maybe it's no good, that whole imposter syndrome type thing that people talk about. Do you ever suffer or deal with that?
Well, I guess I suffer from imposter syndrome, but not necessarily on this topic. And I'll tell you why. I kind of had some practice before I ever launched the blog. I didn't launch the blog as my first thing I ever did online. I'd been participating on internet forums at that point for, 6 or 7 years. And so I knew that there was a big need for this information. I knew that I knew more about it than the vast majority of doctors out there. And so it wasn't really hard for me to step into that position and speak with authority from day one. Now, do I know everything? No, I'm still learning stuff. I learned something new just this week. Happens all the time. But when you know more than most people, you've usually got something to teach them. A lot of docs are really worried about sharing their financial knowledge with others. So I encourage them, get up in front of a group, give them a presentation, wait till the questions at the end. And when you get the questions at the end, you will realize that there's a reason you're the one giving the talk, because the questions are going to be so basic, you can't believe your audience didn't already know that stuff.
I mean, I'd like to think that the questions now, probably from the ones from 12 years ago, they're a little different thanks to you and everything that you've built. Let me ask you, now that you've built this, I would say, I like to call it almost like an empire, right? Where you've built this started with this blog, you've got this podcast. It's just really a media company now. Like, was all that kind of set in your mind as you started this?
No, we absolutely made it all up as we went along. Even the blog. I didn't know how to blog, but it's amazing what you can learn from Google. How to start a blog. It'll give you an answer, how to do this, how to do that. And so our first, even through about 2017, 2018, 2019, we still didn't have anybody full-time working here, and certainly nobody that had any experience doing any of this stuff. We all learned it on the job, tried to figure it out, including when we started the podcast. I turned to Cindy, who was the only, employee at that time. And I said, we're going to do a podcast. I'm going to sit in front of the microphone and talk. You're going to do everything else. And she had to go out and figure out how to produce a podcast. This was something she had no experience doing whatsoever. Her degree is in social work, right? Had nothing to do with podcasting. And that's the way a lot of entrepreneurship is. You make it up as you go along, you fake it till you make it, and eventually you figure this stuff out.
I mean, when did this become real for you? Meaning that, what part of this journey did you think, all right, this is a legit business. This is my career, my impact, my legacy. When did all that start to happen?
I still don't know that it's my, my legacy. We'll see how people judge me in future years. But as far as a business, my goal was to make money from the beginning. I mean, we put ads on the website the first week. My kids would crawl up on my lap and ask me, how much money did your website make today, Dad? And we'd look it up and it'd be $1.37. I mean, literally it was from one person clicking on one Google ad. But I said, if I'm not making $1,000 a month after 2 years, I was going to quit and go do something else. And we barely made that. That was, no kidding, about what we were doing 2 years into it. About a year after that, I realized a few things about monetizing a website. And that's probably about when I realized I had something special here. I realized it was the #1 hit for some, easily monetizable terms on Google. And that I had potential to put a book out there and actually have it sell and those sorts of things. And that's probably when I realized it. That was, about 3 years in, probably.
So, I mean, you mentioned you're making it up as you go. And that's, I think a lot of physicians are worried about that. Like, there's no roadmap for them like there is in medicine. So what do you do? I mean, how do you talk to people when they're thinking about starting a business? It doesn't have to be a blog, but they're worried about what's to come, all the processes. And they're constantly, I'm sure, asking you, like, how did you do it? Like, what kind of advice do you give them?
I think the most important thing for an entrepreneur to understand is the concept of runway, right? That's the length of time you have to get the business off the ground, to get the plane off the ground, right? So that you're actually, bringing enough money to cover your expenses so you still have lift on the business and gravity doesn't pull you to the ground. And doctors have this huge advantage when it comes to runway. Most of them have a pretty good income completely separate from whatever this entrepreneurial gig is. And that provides them sometimes, like with the white coat investor, an infinite runway. I could do things with a mindset for the long term because I didn't need the money. I had this great clinical income coming in, right? I was practicing medicine, getting paid well for it. And so that provided this very, very long runway. I have people come to me all the time that have started, some sort of entrepreneurial venture. Maybe it's a product or maybe it's something else and they need funding and that sort of a thing. And they're not very far into this journey and they're already hitting me up for money because they've already run through their runway. And so my recommendation is do whatever you can to make your runway as long as you possibly can. Bootstrapping what you can, using money you have, reinvesting money coming from the business. Try not to go out to, angel investors and try not to go necessarily to VC and private equity type people and have your A round, your B round, your C round, and your D round. Because every time you do that, you're shortening a runway. Right? Because they all have expectations of how that business is going to do. And those sorts of pressures are what cause most businesses to fail. Whereas if you have this infinite runway, it's up to you when the business fails. You can close it at any time. As long as you can keep your expenses under whatever you're bringing in, it's just a matter of how much time you want to put into it.
I mean, now that you have this breadth of experience with entrepreneurship, building this massive company, well, what are some of the other challenges that you've had to deal with that maybe people should know about?
Oh, I think a challenge for a lot of docs, and this is true whether it's their entrepreneurial venture or whether it is, their practice itself is scaling, hiring, firing, managing other people, scaling the business. You have to actually, not do everything. And that is hard because a lot of it is stuff that you can do better than the person you're hiring to do it. But you literally cannot do it all. You cannot do it all without burning out. And so even if they're not doing it as well as you have to let them do it. And I think that's hard for a lot of, perfectionistic docs, which most of us are. You have to be in order to get through medical school and residency. And of course, nobody's ever taught you these skills or this business information of how to hire somebody. Where do you learn that sort of stuff? And again, a lot of it is figuring out as you go along. Now, as you grow, you oftentimes realize that there are people out there that are better at doing stuff than you are. And those, of course, are the greatest hires you can find, because not only is it not somebody that you have to teach how to do their job or someone that has to learn how to do their job, they already know how to do their job and they're always going to do it better than you. And so eventually you want to get to that point where the hires are doing a better job than you could ever do. And you have to have the humility to step back and recognize that they're better at their job than you would be.
You talk to a lot of docs and they're obviously talking about money quite a bit, and you like to tell it like it is, right? Do you think all docs should at least consider a side gig or a business? And if not, who is it for?
No, I don't think everybody should do it. I don't think everybody would be successful at it. I think there's a certain mindset that's required. Some of that can be learned. Some of that can probably be taught. I mean, I've got a daughter right now. She's in business undergraduate, essentially, with a focus on entrepreneurship. So clearly they wouldn't have this major if they didn't think it could be taught. But I think there's some people that are perfectly happy being employees. We just surveyed our audience, and I think about 70% of them are employees. And that's fine. You can still be very financially successful being an employee. You do obviously have to carve out money and save it and invest it for the future. Entrepreneurship is for everybody. I don't know what the best way to tell if it's for you. I think most entrepreneurs can't be talked out of it. The same way as people going to medical school. If you can be talked out of medical school, you probably should be. And if you can be talked out of entrepreneurship, you probably should be. It is true that most small businesses fail relatively rapidly. But if this is your thing, you're not going to let that keep you from trying.
What's something that, again, you do a lot of interviews, you reveal a lot about yourself, you've got social media, you do a lot of these interviews, but what's something that you think that people may not know about you that they'd be interested to know, especially when it comes to this whole world of entrepreneurship, dealing with all this other stuff on the back end that maybe people don't see?
I think a lot of people might be surprised to learn that I'm very much an introvert. If you define an introvert and an extrovert is somebody who kind of recharges being around other people. An introvert is somebody that's got to step back and take some time alone to kind of recharge their batteries. And I think a lot of doctors are introverts, and that shouldn't necessarily keep you from being an entrepreneur or starting a business or owning your practice. I think it's something where introverts can do it. Yes, you've got to still take that time to recharge your batteries out there, and you may not be as natural at it as somebody with maybe higher emotional intelligence than what you have. But a lot of people may not realize that, despite all the people listening to podcasts and watching videos and reading blog posts, I'm very much an introvert.
So what does your life look like today now with the business? Again, how has that changed over time? Obviously balancing your career, your family, and all of that.
A few years ago, I wrote up a Venn diagram of what my life looked like and what my ideal life looked like. And I've been trying to match those two circles as best I can over the last 4 or 5 years, and I've gotten a lot closer. Right now, I work 6-day shifts a month in the emergency department. So that's about 50 hours a month in the emergency department. I only serve on one committee from this one for my group, and that is our hiring committee. So I participate when we're hiring new docs. And that's about it for my physician professional life. As far as White Coat Investor goes, I'm probably still doing a little bit more of that than I wrote down in that ideal life. I think my ideal life said I was only working on that 1 or 2 days a week, and I probably work on it, 4 or 5 days a week for a significant amount of time. So maybe I haven't quite succeeded there, but I'm certainly getting a lot more time with my family. I rarely miss, my daughter's basketball games now. I'm coaching my son's hockey team, which I was never able to do before. We go on a lot of trips, both as a family, as a couple, as an individual with friends, that I wasn't able to do before. So it's a pretty good life these days. I wake up about the same time and go to bed about the same time every day, other than when I have those early morning shifts. And I'm able to work out, more days than I don't. And I feel like my own wellness is a whole lot better than it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, Jim, I know that people are going to hear this. Some of these people are going to learn some new things about you. And obviously, people know who you are. But for some people that may not know where to find you, contact you, they might not even know about the breadth of products and ways that you can help them out. Where can people do that?
Well, the brand name is The White Coat Investor. And so that's kind of what we put on everything. We put it on the books, the podcast, the website, etc. So it's, www.whitecoatinvestor.com. That's the hub for everything. But however you like to learn, we put something out in that format, whether that's audio or video or written word or emails or social media or online courses, live conferences, whatever. We've tried to put this information into that format for you. So come check us out at whitecoatinvestor.com.
All right, Jim, let's leave people with one big tip for someone who is thinking about starting a business. Maybe somebody's following in your footsteps to a degree.
I think the most important thing you can do is be persistent, right? It's not a guarantee that if you're persistent, you'll be successful, but it is a necessary condition. If you're not persistent, you will not be successful.
I mean, that's for sure. I think that's something you and I both learned over time through this journey. But again, I want to just take a moment to just say thanks for all you do for our community. I'm sure a lot of people here have been impacted by some of the content you put out. I mean, in different ways, right? People should definitely check that out. Go to whitecoatinvestor.com, get educated, figure out how this can actually help your life and your situation. Jim, you're an amazing example of a great entrepreneur, especially in the physician world, and really appreciate all you do. So let's talk again soon. Really loved having you here. Thanks.
Thank you for your kind words, Peter.
All right. Bye.